So I want to let everybody know you're going to get this message. There you go. The reason why we're recording it is because for people who can't attend tonight, we want to make sure that we post it up on the website and give everybody an opportunity to see the content and then give us comments later. So I am Leah Schmidt. I work with the planning division, and I'm heading up the sort of housing element portion of the big project. The housing element is being combined with updates to the climate action plan, the development of an environmental justice update, and then updates to the safety element of the general plan. And so I've partnered with a group of people from the city, and we together comprise the sort of housing and climate team. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to some of the other city staff to introduce themselves before we hand the meeting over to Rincon, who are our consultants and have prepared the materials that we'll be reviewing tonight. So with that, Eric, you want to go?
Thanks, Leah. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Pearson. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for the City of Hayward. I'll pass it on to Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Grecki. I'm the Sustainability Specialist with the city, and I'll pass it to Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn, and I'm a Climate Corps Fellow with the city, and I'm the one that you've been getting emails from. And I'll pass it to Mira.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Mira Han, and I'm an Associate Planner with the City of Hayward. Welcome, everyone.
Great. And with that, we'll introduce our Rincon team that are working tonight. We have Eric Vaughn, Sarah Chowdhury, and Adriana, I believe, Romero Velasquez. With that, I'll hand it off to them to do our presentation.
Welcome everyone to the workshop. We're excited to get started here, especially with the activity. So let's get right into it. So just some agenda items, so we kind of know the schedule here. We're going to first go through some housekeeping items, just some quick go-bys and instructions. We'll proceed to a poll question so we can get to know you better and understand who's participating. We'll follow that with a recap of what is environmental justice. So a lot of things that we went over at the first workshop and just some background so that we all have a good foundation before we get into the discussion. And then lastly, and kind of the bulk of the workshop is going to be the policy framework discussion. This is where we're going to gain all of your input and get all of your feedback. So that's really going to be the core of this presentation and kind of the meat of everything here. So let's get these housekeeping items out of the way. So the first thing is just that technology happens. Let's try to be flexible and patient throughout this workshop. Make sure that, if technology mishaps are happening with anyone who's speaking, or if anyone's sharing and there's some trouble, we're all being flexible and understanding through that process. Another thing is that we're here to help. So if you need any tech support, if you are having trouble speaking or anything along those lines, you can reach out to tech support for the live assistance. So hopefully we're going to review some of the basics of Zoom. So hopefully none of those issues will come up, but that's there just in case. The third thing is to please remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking. We want to make sure that everyone who chooses to speak and chooses to share gets to be able to be heard and make sure that there's no interruptions. So it's an easy thing to miss. So let's just all keep that on our radar. Remember to mute when you are not sharing. Lastly, during the discussion activity, we want to make sure that only one person speaks at a time. Again, that's just making sure we're respectful to everyone who's choosing to share and making sure that everyone is being heard. Okay, let's get into kind of the Zoom recap here. So you all probably can see on your screen, there's a mute button in the left-hand corner. So when you choose to speak, you unmute by pressing the mute button. Similarly, if you'd like to turn on your video, there's a stop and start video button adjacent to the mute button in the left-hand corner. If you would rather not share your comment via audio, you can also input a comment via the chat button. And the chat should pop up on the right, and you can share comments there as well. Another really major thing as we're sharing is that before you share, please remember to raise your hand. You'll be called upon to share, and everyone who raises their hand will get a chance to speak. We just want to make sure it's done in an organized fashion. So just remember, when it's your opportunity or when you would like to speak, just remember to raise your hand by pressing the reactions button and pressing raise hand. Your name will be called and then you can proceed to speak. Okay, so we're going to get started with kind of a get to know you activity. This is just some poll questions. So I'm going to launch the poll here. Please take some time to fill it out. We want to know, who's participating, your name, if you represent an organization, what organization that might be, and your connection to Hayward. So if you're a resident, you can share that. If you're a business owner, things along those lines. So I'm going to get this poll activated. And it should pop up on your screen. I'll give us a few minutes to participate for those who choose to participate in the poll. And again, all of this information is so that we can just get to know you a little better, understand who's participating, and also just so that we're aware of the types of feedback we're receiving, making sure it is representative. I'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes. We had someone who raised their hand, I'm seeing.
Yeah, I did raise my hand. I was wondering, so it says, do you currently live in Hayward? I live in San Lorenzo, so would I still need to fill this out or?
Yeah, you can still fill it out even if you don't live in Hayward. If a question isn't applicable to you, then you can just skip that. But if there are questions that are applicable to you, then you can proceed to fill that out.
Okay, cool, got it.
Great.
Hey, Sarah, while we're paused real quick, can you possibly turn on the closed captioning feature of PowerPoint?
Yes, 1 second. Let me unshare my screen here so I can do that. Not sure that I've done that before, so I may need a little walkthrough, Eric, if you could. Do you know where it's located within the PowerPoint?
But I'll look.
Okay, sounds good.
Sarah, I just looked it up and it should be on the view ribbon tab. There should be a button that says subtitles.
Okay, let me identify that.
Or it might be on the slideshow tab.
Oh, see that. It's actually not allowing me to access it. 1 second.
There's a choice called live transcript. That works.
Okay. Okay, I'm hoping that worked. Have it set on. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Okay, great. Looks like we got it working. Thanks for bearing with me there. Just making sure we're going to end the poll here. Thank you everyone for participating. Let's proceed. Okay. So we're going to get into the kind of refresher background. So many of you may have heard this before at the first workshop, or if you reviewed some of the documents, but just want to make sure that we reiterate this. So what is environmental justice? The state of California has a lengthy definition for environmental justice. It's defined as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So that's a mouthful. And what does that really mean? So really, environmental justice is focused on the equal distribution and the fair distribution of environmental burden and environmental benefit. So what is environmental burden? Environmental burdens are things like air pollution, water pollution, and environmental benefit are things like access to parks, access to resources, things along those lines. So environmental justice is really focused on making sure that those two things are distributed equally, regardless of ethnic makeup, race, or any kind of sub-community you're in. So what is the environmental justice element then? The environmental justice element is a requirement for all cities in California per Senate Bill 1000. So Senate Bill 1000 requires that cities incorporate environmental justice policies into their general plan. The element is essentially a policy document that defines goals and policies for disadvantaged communities in cities in California. The goal of the element is to reduce unique or compounded health risks, promote civil engagement in public decision-making processes, and prioritize improvements and programs for disadvantaged communities. So what is a disadvantaged community, or what is also called an environmental justice community? The California EPA has been tasked with defining disadvantaged communities using a tool called CalEnviroscreen. So CalEnviroscreen is a formulaic tool created by the Cal EPA to identify disadvantaged communities in California, depending on census tract. The CalEnviroscreen tool uses percentile scores to establish a threshold for what is considered disadvantaged or not, utilizing two main metrics. The first is pollution burden, and the second is population characteristics. So that is one method for identifying disadvantaged communities. Disadvantaged communities can also be identified within a city or community by looking at the local context, getting community feedback, and just basing it off of the specifics of the community and the specific features of a community. So what are the environmental justice communities in Hayward, and what is the CalEnviroscreen score? What do the CalEnviroscreen scores look like in Hayward? So this is a map of the Cal EPA CalEnviroscreen tool. As I mentioned, it's very formulaic. It looks at pollution burden and population characteristics to assign each census tract a score or a percentile. Percentile scoring above the 75th percentile, or census tracts rather, scoring above the 75th percentile are considered by CalEnviroscreen as disadvantaged communities. Based on this map, you could probably note that there are no CalEnviroscreen disadvantaged communities identified within Hayward. However, there are areas with higher levels of pollution burden and higher levels of different population characteristics, maybe areas that have lower incomes and things along those lines. So these things have all been noted in the existing conditions analysis we've done, and are things that we've noted in the policy framework and have informed some of that framework. Okay, now that that brief background on environmental justice is done, we can kind of get into this workshop today. So let's just do a quick process update so we understand where we're at. So we've identified environmental justice communities thus far. We've done an existing conditions analysis via a technical report. We've also hosted the first workshop, which really got community input on the existing conditions analysis that we've done. And now we've developed a policy framework, which are really policy topics and a policy outline for the environmental justice element using the workshop 1 feedback, as well as the existing conditions analysis. So today at workshop 2, we're really here to get your input on the policy framework and help us to make sure that we're on the right track before we get into the formal policy development. So how were the policy frameworks developed? So again, we utilized information from workshop 1, which we have some screenshots here sharing some of the feedback. And we've also utilized information that we've gathered from the environmental justice technical report. Utilizing those two things, we've identified key policy topic areas that should be addressed within the policy element. And we've done that for different goals or different, essentially, subtopics. So again, this is a topic outline for the environmental justice policies. It's outlined so that there is a goal theme, so a theme item for the policies. And then under each theme, there is key policy topic areas. Again, areas that will be used to form the ultimately the policies that we put into the element. So here are the proposed goal themes. There are 6 of them. The first is pollution exposure. So that looks at air, water, and land pollution. The second is public facilities and accessibility. The third is food access. The fourth is safe and sanitary homes. The fifth is physical activity and health. And the 6th and final one is disadvantaged communities. So before we present to you the policy frameworks that we've developed, I'm just going to do a brief activity overview. So first, what I'll be doing is I'll be presenting each policy framework. So it'll look like a goal and policy topics that are under it. I'll be presenting each one and going through each policy topic area. Then we will open it up for a discussion where we will get your feedback, again, either via audio or via the Zoom chat. And we will discuss this openly. Everyone will have a chance to share. And then third, all of that will be presented on a virtual mural board where you'll be able to see some of the feedback that you've shared. We are going to try to get everyone's feedback down on the mural board, but if we don't worry, this workshop's being recorded. So we will have your feedback recorded either way, but we will definitely try to make sure everyone's feedback is represented on the board. Again, before we get into the activity, we want to make sure that you are sharing as much input as possible. So here are some questions to consider. The first is, do you notice any important topics missing from the policy topics that we have outlined? So are there any gaps that you think we need to include when we start developing the policies themselves? The second is there any critical information or key details you feel should be addressed within any of the existing policy topics? So maybe you like the policy topic that is presented, but you think maybe that there's more information to address, or that the policy should go in a specific direction. You can share that as well, and that's the kind of feedback we really want to get from you today. So keep those in mind. Once again, quick Zoom recap. We've already overviewed this, but the mute button is on the left. Stop and start video is adjacent to that on the left. You can also share comments via the chat feature. And then lastly, please raise your hand if you'd like to share. You'll be called upon if you raise your hand, and then you can proceed to speak. The goals will be presented, the policy frameworks rather, will be presented by showing a goal theme at the top and the policy topics listed under it, just so you have an understanding of how everything is outlined. Let's get into it. The first goal topic here is pollution exposure. So the policy topics we've identified for pollution exposure include the reduction of diesel particulate matter along the 880 and Mission Boulevard, prioritizing cleanup site exposure for nearby residential areas. So addressing cleanup site exposure rather in residential areas that are near cleanup sites. The third is addressing exposure to hazardous waste generators. The fourth is reducing exposure to polluting sources for proximal residential areas. So what that means is areas that are adjacent to polluting sources or impacted by polluting sources heavily, we want to reduce that exposure. The next is access to air purification systems, so improving that access for the public. The next is increasing public information regarding air quality hazards, so making sure information is disseminated well. And the last and final one is greening initiatives along major travel corridors. So just making sure that there is tree canopy and park access points, things along those lines. So I'll leave this up for another minute. I know many of you have received the policy frameworks before the meeting and have reviewed them already, but I'll just leave this up for anyone who may have missed the policy framework document. And in just a few seconds, we're going to transfer over to the mural board and begin the discussion. Okay, I think we can get started on the discussion. So let's hear some of your feedback. We want to know, given the pollution exposure policy topics we've developed, is there anything that you feel wasn't included or that could be expanded on, things along those lines? Feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you to begin the discussion. This might be a really good, this might be a good sign that the policy topics were comprehensive. It looks like at this time we don't have any people raising their hand.
I'm wondering, Sarah, do you want to show the mural board so that when people's comments are posted?
Oh yeah, I was under the impression that you could see the mural board. Is it not?
It's the PowerPoint.
Oh. Let me.
Yeah, I think we're a little confused about what we're commenting on right now. So just...
Oh, okay, that was my mistake.
No,
Here you go. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, we can see the mural board now. And I'll field hands up in the air and for the conversation. And then just a quick note, the people can also, if you don't feel comfortable raising your hand or you don't want to talk in a public setting or, you know, you want to get your thoughts out, you can always use the chat as well. And we'll make sure that chat comments or questions get put onto the mural board as well. So why don't we start with Dan? I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that comes up fairly frequently that's not on this list, and I don't know if it shows up somewhere else, is basically a problem with illegal dumping. So is that covered in, would that be covered in this one, this goal or topic area, or would that more appropriately be somewhere else?
Yeah, so illegal dumping is something that we can address under pollution exposure. Do you have any specifics or more details that you'd like to identify with regard to illegal dumping, or you just want that topic to be addressed?
Well, I think the topic needs to be addressed. And, sure. You know, I live here in Hayward and participate in a lot of events. And pretty much everywhere I go, I see illegal dumping. I should say the effects of illegal dumping, because I never catch anyone red-handed doing it. But along Industrial near Sohay is just under the Bark Bridge, the Bark Trestle, there's frequently dumping there. It's like every week on both sides of industrial. Mattresses, refrigerators, chairs, you know, big bulky items like that. And then over by the Mexico Super, there's another, you know, popular frequent dump site. And I think pretty much I could easily catalog about a dozen sites that are like that. And I know from talking to the neighbors at these different locations that they're upset by it. They'd like to see something done. And, you know, the effect that it has on them probably has more to do with, you know, visual pollution than, you know, the traditional effects of pollution you might be thinking about. It's not particulate matter, it's not smog, it's not noise, but it's gross. It's gross to look at, and it's, you know, it has a psychological impact on the people that have to live there.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. So we'll make sure that also visual pollution is addressed here under pollution exposure. And then we have that noted, as you can see. So thank you so much for sharing.
And next is Tom. Tom, you're muted.
Can't hear you. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I've always wondered about Hayward. There's so many people trying to get through Hayward, you know, to their next destination, to the bridge, you know, Hesperian, A Street, Tennyson, Mission, these massive sort of thoroughfares. Is there any possibility of, and I don't know if this is the right framework here, of reducing the amount of car traffic which spits out so much of that pollution? You know, and I know cities are doing it around the world that are redirecting traffic, keeping traffic out of their city centers, restricting access. I know that sounds radical in a way if you think of where Hayward's positioned in the Bay Area, because everybody's trying to get through it. But at the same time, Hayward has to protect Hayward and Hayward citizens. So is there any way of just of moving, and especially some of these thoroughfares, if you think of like Hesperian, or you think of, they're almost like freeways with stoplights. And that, you know, of course, if you're biking near there, walking near there, going to school near there, playing soccer near there, whatever you're doing, you're definitely experiencing a lot of pollution exposure.
Sure. So traffic definitely is a pollution exposure topic. And we can definitely look at creating a policy focused on limiting pollution exposure as a result of traffic, and maybe exploring traffic calming measures to reduce pollution for those areas that have traffic related pollution problems. So that's definitely something we can explore and see how we can incorporate that into this framework.
Yeah, and I think this really aligns with like our climate action plan and climate goals related to reducing reliance on single occupancy vehicles, and we, you know, and increasing our active transportation corridors, which, you know, is something that our engineering division is working on, and you know, investing in bike lanes and sidewalks and connecting pedestrians, and like prioritizing that over cars. But I think that in terms of like Mission Boulevard, that's not a city facility. We don't have any control over it, honestly. So just wanting to be clear about like sort of the limitations of what the city could do in it, you know, but creating like bicycle boulevards, you know, and doing the traffic calming things that Sarah just brought up are definitely like within the purview of a local jurisdiction. And then, Tom, do you have anything else to add? Maybe later? Okay, moving on to Julie.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I know you're speaking to all of us faceless tonight, but somehow like the things around the house, it was easier to have the video off, but hi, everyone. Yeah, I had similar comments to Tom, because I was thinking about sometimes when I drive around, I see kids doing their runs, like maybe for track practice or something like that along Mission Boulevard, and some of the playgrounds that are along the busier thoroughfares. And I was thinking, like walls of trees to separate the kids and the, and the traffic, for, similar to what we just talked about, Tom, because yeah, I just do worry about that constant daily exposure. Like, and while they're exercising, that's like they're bigger gulps of air as they're moving along. So yeah, I mean, maybe, it's just another opportunity to plant more trees along some of those, you see some of those chain link fences with kids right on the other side next to some of these busier roads. So yeah, that's all the comment I have for right now. And thank you everyone for what you're doing tonight.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. I think, increasing tree canopy and increasing just greening across the city as a way to limit pollution exposure is definitely something we're exploring. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and in addition, maybe in addition to planting more trees, I might even be like a little bit more specific on a sticky note and say, landscaped buffers along schools and recreational facilities, and like really being very intentional about where that's occurring, so that we're clear when we're moving forward about like if we have resources, where are we spending them, and making sure they're going in the right spots.
Yeah, and maybe like establishing a buffer, like a distance to these particularly like loaded corridors, for locations like that are within a certain area distance. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Great.
Any other sort of questions or comments about the pollution exposure topic? I don't see any hands up right now.
Can I say one more thing?
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks, Leah. Yeah, since no one else is, I just thought might as well have a discussion. I was also just thinking about, when we decide to put in larger housing complexes that, they are often along, the transportation corridors and therefore more traffic that, so for the similar reasons, that those complexes, just because they need to be close to transportation doesn't mean they can't have the same buffers that you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, and maybe that is a planning thing that we need to talk about, but yeah, I think, similar focus, making sure that whole housing development is the best we can to provide those natural buffers, I think is a good thing to keep note of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you, Leah.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. All right, do we have any more hands raised before we move on to the next policy framework? Okay, looks like we are done discussing this policy framework. Again, you can share your thoughts in the chat as well, so feel free to do that. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. Okay, so the next policy framework is public facilities and accessibility. So the policy topics we've outlined for public facilities and accessibility are improving bus stop signage and shelters, expanding youth recreation activities, developing an equity focus and focusing on equity-based investments in public facilities. Next is utilizing crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED strategies for park safety. So really focus on park safety through park design. The next is regularly assessing the quality and accessibility of parks. So making sure that we are being on top of assessing park safety, park quality. The next is improving park accessibility for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users. So making sure that there's adequate connectivity for people who choose to use active transportation. The next is increasing park quality and park safety. Next is improving park access in low access areas of the city. So using what we found in the existing conditions report to identify where the low access areas are and improve park access in those areas. And the last is requiring green space for new high density development. So I'll leave this on for just a few seconds. I'll go back to the first screen as well after that, and then we'll get into the discussion. There's the first list of topics. Okay, let's get into the discussion. So you can go ahead and begin raising your hands, and you can get called on by Leah if you'd like to share.
Julie?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, two things. It kind of came up the other night in that joint meeting between HARD and the school district and city council, but we were talking about summer programs that like people could count on that were affordable or maybe free. Because I was thinking, I remembered as a kid, all the local public elementaries, or kind of every other one, had these summer like recreation drop-in programs. And I'd love to see us try to do something like that, because the need for childcare, of course, doesn't end at when school's out at the end of the summer. And often, if people just they want their kids, of course, more than ever to get out now and do some things, because coming off the pandemic, all of our kids have gotten way too addicted to technology. So I would love to look at something like that, summer program, like free or affordable, because even HARD offers scholarships for a lot of their programs, but they're not that easy to get to, is my understanding, and they fill up really quickly. So a lot of people just kind of give up. So something that's it doesn't even have to be all day, but because I remember it was like a 10 to 2, just drop in, and there was always a leader there, a recreation leader, and you could just check in. So something like that, that sort of extensive. And then my second note was like in safety in parks, and I believe this is now a HARD situation, but the new Sohay Park definitely needs a fence between Mission Boulevard and that park. Like every time I drive by now, I cringe, because my son was a runner when he was younger, and I could not go to a park like that was anywhere near a busy road. And that's another one too, talking about sort of a green buffer between the park and the street would be great for some trees. I don't know if maybe they're planted and we just don't see them, but a fence line and some trees, I think would be great along there, along that specific park. So that's all I have specifically for now.
Great, thank you for sharing. So the first topic you mentioned was kind of expanding on the youth activities and youth programs policy topic we've developed to also include mentions of increasing affordability, making sure that things like scholarships are more accessible. And then your second topic was with regard to fencing along parks and ensuring that there's a buffer to ensure safety at parks. Great. And a lot of these are included within the CPTED design strategies for park safety, but it's good to know some specifics about what you're particularly concerned about at your parks.
Great. So Eric, you're next.
Hi, everybody, good evening. Good to see you all again from Monday. This is more of a process question, and also maybe going off what Julie said. How is what we're proposing in this document, how does that intersect with HARD? Since they're the ones operating the park, are they involved in this process? Are they also going to be implementing or be part of implementing these bullets that we're proposing?
Well, we have a master license agreement with HARD, the city does, and work closely with them. And so some of the equity stuff and the programming stuff would be in partnership with them, obviously. The design though, is really the design and management and maintenance of parks, that's really all under HARD. And then, in the agreements between us and HARD is where we can, have minimum maintenance standards. And then the other thing is there's HARD parks, which are like public parks, but then there's just green and open spaces that are like part of development projects like plazas, other open spaces. And so some of these principles could be used as part of those developments as well. But I think your point is well taken, that like the city can only do so much if HARD is the owner and maintainer and, you know, runner of the park system. You know, so it's partnership.
And really, a lot of these policies are focused on establishing priorities for the city. So even if it's within the control of HARB, these priorities are still priorities that the city has identified as its priorities. So that can be used when, you know, establishing communication or trying to work on a new project, and even if it's in coordination with another group. So just really focused on identifying what the city's priorities are and what the city hopes to improve on.
Yeah, and I think I might just back up a little bit on that one and say, this is just a draft framework based on the existing conditions report and what we heard in the first community meeting. What you're looking at is not a city document. This is what we saw in the existing conditions report as, you know, Rincon technical and professional staff. This is what we heard from the community. You know, no commissioner, no council member, no hard board member, no one has looked at this. This is just us sort of saying, this is what we heard. What do you guys think of it? You know, we can change it, we can add it, but it'll go to committees and it'll go to the council ultimately. And they may believe that this is not appropriate. You know what I mean? So I just want to be clear about where we are in the process. This is just, you know, us sort of like bringing back to you what we've heard and seen in the first phases of the project before we take it forward.
Yeah, we are not at the stage of policy development. So what you see in the policy framework are not policies, but rather just information to inform those policies when we do develop those policies, which again will, as Leah mentioned, will ultimately have to be approved by the city.
If I could add, we're going to be presenting this draft policy framework to the City Council Sustainability Committee in a couple of weeks on May 9th. So we're going to be talking about both the environmental justice element and also the climate action plan update with the committee at that meeting. So that'll be kind of, I think, the first review of this by at least some of the city council members, and then we will also be, you know, summarizing the comments that we received tonight. Will be a part of that discussion as well.
Do you have any other comments, Eric?
Not at the moment. I can put them in the chat. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Cool. Katie?
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? I'm outside.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm just wondering if the city has plans to include increasing EV charging station installations on city managed and owned property to give people more access to charging infrastructure. And also if the city has adopted EV ready building codes for multifamily dwellings and commercial buildings.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Eric, I was going to knock it over to you for this one.
So we do a lot of work with East Bay Community Energy. They are hoping to develop an entire countywide network of publicly available EV chargers. And right now we're still working out details of design and financing. We've applied for a grant to at least get one facility, hopefully at the Cinema Place parking structure. But the idea is to have several hubs throughout the city. But yeah, it's going to take some time to bring that to fruition. As far as codes, yes, we do have a building code. It's called a REACH code that basically requires more than what the state code requires. And so that was adopted a couple of years ago by our council. And so it does require a significant amount of EV charging for all kinds of new construction, new homes, new multifamily buildings. And we're actually in the process of updating that REACH code. We have to adopt a new one by the end of this year in order for it to continue into 2023.
And as part of that REACH code, I believe there are there's no new gas connections. There are other, there require new development is required to have solar on it. There's other like standards that are quite they're sort of take the building code a little bit further, right? Other than the EV charging.
That's correct. Yeah, the EV charging is just one part of it. The REACH code, basically the current REACH code prohibits natural gas in all new single family homes and any multifamily building that's 3 stories or less. And so that prohibition of natural gas may be expanding to larger multifamily buildings in the new REACH code.
Anything else you want to add or ask, Katie?
No, that answered my questions. Thank you.
And then Julie, did you have more to add?
Yeah, I just Katie's comments or made me think of something that I see a lot of discussion online about people wanting to, use electric bikes, but people worry about them getting stolen. And I was wondering like about sort of infrastructure for bike storage. I mean, both in new housing, like seems like we have to make that easy, like both charging and storage, but then also in shopping corridors to make it safe for people to be able to pop into a store. I don't know what that looks like, but I know there are like they used to have those storage lockers for people to put their whole bike inside something, but there's just a lot of talk about this that like I want to do, but I'm afraid to like ride my bike downtown and leave it anywhere, go into a restaurant. So I don't know, maybe that is sort of a futuristic thing, but making it easy for people to be able to use these devices or these vehicles. And then the other thing I was wondering is have we ever looked at, I mean, I know there's people have talked about this, but using like Home Depot parking lots or other large parking lots along Mission Boulevard to put in EV charging and having some sort of, understanding that it's like nighttime only charging and then the chargers go off, they're not available during the day, but that at nighttime it would be a place for people to park and charge their cars. And, in some sort of, because those parking lots are empty all night long. It's kind of a waste. But anyway, just wondering if there would ever be collaboration there between business and the city for electric charging. Those are my comments. Thank you, Leah.
I think they're good ideas. Eric, have you guys ever approached sort of, in that public-private partnership thing with like big businesses?
We have not, but it's something we might explore. Yeah, thank you.
Good idea. Okay, any other sort of comments or questions? Anyone want to continue chatting about public facilities and accessibility? There's someone put into the chat, Kian, I believe, about working at Kennedy Park. And talking about sort of homeless people living in the park, and that there was a park ranger who would enforce rules and go by there to keep it safe. So yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. It's the homeless situation in public open spaces is something that's continuing to be a challenge. Having communities come together in those public spaces, whether it's a library or a park, it's something that we have to acknowledge and figure out how to make everybody feel like they have a space,
That's a good thing to note for some of our park safety policies, and that in particular is an issue with regard to park safety. So that's very helpful to know.
Tom?
Whoops. Just a note on safety, and I don't know what the city could really do about it. I'm an instructor at Chabot, and the 2 big reasons my students don't take the bus are my female students are uncomfortable because they get harassed. I don't know what a city does about that, and cities can't solve every social problem, but it's a real thing. And the other thing is because we have never been able to figure out how to get our students passes. And so the difference, between doing public transportation and not doing public transportation is, what for the students is too much of a cost. And it just seems between the city and the college, since the college is such a, major institution in the city, we should collectively be able to figure out how to work with AC Transit and get our students passes. We would definitely increase bus use like immediately if we were able to do that.
Okay, great. So maybe policy topics focused on increasing affordability of public transit, maybe through different programs or things along those lines. That's a good topic.
Yeah, I think
And
it also straddles the pollution mural board as well.
Right, correct. And I think you also mentioned in the beginning as public safety on public transit. So maybe some policies focused on things that can be incorporated to increase public safety on buses and public transit within the city. That's a good topic as well. Thank you. Any other hand raised, or are we good to move on to the next policy framework?
I think Katie has her hand raised. I think she might be, unless you have something else, Katie. We can move on to Kian before.
I forgot to lower my hand. My bad.
And Kian, do you have something to add to the public facilities?
One thing I did see at Kennedy Park, when they did reopen it, is that some of the trash cans, they actually have like signs, like one for trash and one for recycling. I think it's like a nice little feature that could be added to like all the parks around. We know that signs don't make it, people don't listen to signs all the time, but I think it would help a lot to make sure these garbage cans are kind of like, to at least help it separate a little bit more. I'm sure there's gonna be some effect of adding more signs overall.
Okay, great. So adding signage at public parks to maybe reduce the amount of pollution, trash, things along those lines. Okay.
Good idea. I know that Eric's in his group would be supportive of that, or recycling.
Yeah, we could definitely work with Hart to improve the signage and labels on cans.
Okay, so with that, just confirming that there's no other hands up, and then we'll move on to food access. Okay, great, we'll move on. Okay, so for the food access topic, we've developed some policy topics focused on first, availability and quality of farmers markets and community gardens. So that's really increasing availability and increasing the quality of local farmers markets and gardens. Also, inspiring public education, focus on healthy meal preparation. So maybe some programs or other types of education that is focused on informing the public on how to cook healthy meals and how to eat in a healthy manner. The third is food accessibility for low-income residents. So increasing food accessibility for low-income residents. The next is partnerships with local food banks and organizations. The next is nutritional education programs. So that kind of goes hand in hand with healthy meal preparation programs. So making sure people are informed about nutritional eating and health impacts of the way we eat. Okay, so I'll let you review these for a few seconds, and then we'll go to the mural board to open it up for discussion. Okay, let's move to the discussion. Okay, If anyone has anything they'd like to share, go ahead and raise your hand.
Great. I think we have Dan and then Julie.
I think Julie and I are probably going to be dominating this discussion, and that's kind of sad, but I hope people will feel comfortable stepping up and participating in this, because it really does make a difference in the city. And I say that because my point about food access is this, that we've had some discussions in the past similar to this, and one of the things that people brought forward was the idea of having fruit stands, authorizing, permitting fruit stands and barbecues, local small business in the neighborhoods. And I'm noticing a proliferation of those, and they look like they're all very popular. And I really would like to see more of that, because I think food availability, especially fresh fruits and, freshly cooked meals available on the spot in the neighborhood is a brilliant alternative to traditional fast food. So I think more of that, and maybe even expanding some of that. The food trucks that we have in the Hayward are not at all like the roach coaches that were around when I was in college. These are actually, very high quality, freshly prepared meal trucks. And I think we can afford to permit more of those, especially in neighborhoods where there's a lack of food service. The proliferation of liquor stores does not make good food service. And so I would like to see potentially some more of that, or at least add that to the study. Thank you.
Those are really good comments. And they also, just in terms of like what you said about the fruit stands and barbecue, I think the reason why you're seeing more of those is because a state law passed, and it's called the food vendor, it's a food vendor law. And so maybe what the city could do is we've been understaffed, and we lost kind of some people that were working on updating the ordinance, but maybe updating the ordinance and looking at ways that we can go beyond what state law requires. And then maybe updating our mobile food vendor ordinance to expand the areas where they're located, and looking at residential areas, or two things that the city could do that kind of would achieve what you were just talking about. Julie?
Thanks. Yeah, and to add to what Dan was saying, one thing I think I mentioned last time is, when we lose a market like the was it the Food Source on Mission Boulevard? Is that what that one? Yeah, I think it was Food Source. But at a location like that, to allow, I know the city would probably have to work in conjunction with the property owner, but to allow pop-up farmers markets or pop-up, like Dan's talking about, these meal places, because we know it's a place that people used to go for food, and to be able to go there and have these spontaneous markets in the parking lot might be a great, that they already know the clientele was used to coming there. And I mean, it would probably have to happen quickly after something closed, but it just seems like a good thing to capitalize on and allow people to come there and congregate, fruit stands, that, like you saying, the meat, use a lot of barbecue, like you said. The other thing I wanted to add is, you were talking about nutrition programs and healthy meal preparation. And I think that's a great idea. And I think if our library could maybe offer something like that, but it would have to be sort of consistent and include like a child program. So maybe a bit of a camp, like a 1-week camp, and each night had something, to make it really easy for the parents to show up, knowing the kids, they're doing it because the kids are going to have fun and get some programming, but they're also going to get some programming on the side. Because I think in isolation, it's hard for people to find the time to do that. But I think the libraries would be a perfect place to offer that as both a summer program and, meal and healthy choice programming. So I think it's a great idea if we can offer something like that, or maybe even at some of the school sites, because I know a lot of them have, kind of PTA type rooms that they would have facilities like that to offer if we did that in conjunction with the school. So
Sure.
those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe expanding on the topic that we have outlined for healthy programs and nutrition programs, expanding on it to include mention of increasing childcare within these programs, making sure childcare is available so that these programs are more accessible. That's a great one.
Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else?
Moving on to Eric.
Yeah, I think as Tom mentioned earlier about the buses, I think this is another opportunity where we'd love to play a role as Chabot in maybe doing some programming or providing some food education. It's something that we're really passionate about on our campus. It's something that our students really care about. And so we'd love to follow up with you all on that and how we could work together on developing such programs. The other thing that I wanted to add to the programs and the educational piece to it is if we could include a cultural or a diversity component to it. All of the years that we've been doing this work and we've been interviewing community members and listening to them, and even just my own experience living in Hayward, the community really loves the diversity of Hayward. And I think anytime we can celebrate and highlight that diversity through any means, especially through food, is just a wonderful opportunity to show the strength of the city. So anytime we can bring in within not just proper nutritional food that's also low carbon or sustainable, also tying into a cultural component would be I think really beneficial. And then I would also just add not just nutrition type classes, but food entrepreneurship at large would be really exciting for folks who are interested in starting food businesses.
Those are some great ideas. I think incorporating some culturally sensitive food topics within the nutritional programs that could be included into the topic. Those are some great ideas.
Great. Moving on to Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Fuang, that's a really good comment that you're making. And you certainly can share it in the room if you want. But what you wrote in the chat's really important. I think another thing in terms of climate action, environmental justice, how these things link up is, the city being more forthright or more informational about the carbon footprint of different kinds of foods and different kinds of diets, and starting to really ramp up this notion of locally grown food. And going out of its way, which I know there's not a lot of that in Hayward. There's some, but even in small pockets, you see this in Los Angeles, for example. You'll see neighborhoods that have started consciously planting food gardens, trees, vegetables, and they're actively sharing these foods with each other. And Safeway might not like that, but it certainly makes the food more local. It has a much lower carbon footprint. It builds community. There's a million things it does. I know we've done, the city's done a good job at recent urban gardens and building out those bigger the newest ones. I'm forgetting what the name is, but I remember when it came in. But I think there's that locally grown food as an emphasis, even if it's 20-mile radius, 30-mile radius, and talking about the meaning of that in terms of the climate justice meaning of that for the citizens would be really helpful, because it's not all food's the same, and it's not just about healthy food and non-healthy food either. It's about where the food's grown, who's been hurt from having to grow the food, how those blueberries were flown up from Peru, and they're not in season, and it's about all those things.
Great. So maybe expanding on the topic that we have of community gardens and community essentially food access by incorporating some discussion of the environmental impacts of locally grown food. That's a great one.
Yeah, I like the idea of the education component.
Great.
I don't see any other hands on this topic right now, but as Tom pointed out, there was a comment about sort of 99 Ranch Market and how the markets that have hot food that they make every day throw it out at the end of the day. So making sure that that food gets captured, you know, as we know, it could lead to, you know, methane release if it's not composted and different things like that. He's saying the person is saying that the food could be sold at a discounted rate or given to homeless communities. So those are good ideas. I think they were captured on the mural board.
Yep.
Anything else?
I was just going to say we have that written down right here in the mural board, so that was captured as well. There's no other hands up, then I can move on to the next topic. Okay. So the next topic is safe and sanitary homes. So the policy topics that we've identified under safe and sanitary homes include high housing cost burden, so addressing high housing cost burden within the city, identifying funding opportunities for necessary home improvements, community tool and resource sharing programs, monitoring and improving rental housing conditions within the city, tenant relocation assistance, protection of for vulnerable renters, and I believe that is it for this topic. So there are 6 topic areas under this, and I'll leave this up for a few seconds so you can review them, and then again we'll get into the discussion. Let's move to the discussion. Okay, let's begin with any hands raised.
We'll start with Julie.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just on the topic of vulnerable populations and rental housing. I do senior legal aid, and more lately, I just feel like seniors are really stressed about the stability of their housing, you know, just sort of not knowing if it's going to end, not knowing if the rent is going to be raised. And that, you know, that population in particular, like, they're not necessarily so savvy online. And I just, you know, whatever we can do as a city to be reaching out to those populations proactively. I know that's a resource problem, but you know, and maybe that's, you know, working with the senior community, advocacy community, but I'm just hearing it more and more, just that sort of stress, you know, they're living under about the insecurity. And so, yeah, whatever, I'm not sure who we would work with and how we staff that up, but something to be specifically proactive about the senior community, I think is really important. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That's a great one. So senior housing and making sure housing is accessible for senior residents. Great.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
I think
and just
the making sure the information gets to seniors too, right? Like that they understand resources and
and with assistance, because even if you drop off a form to them, like, I'm not sure for a lot of, and mainly and partly because it's such a stressful thing. So if someone just sort of was able to calmly walk them through their options, or even if they've just missed some deadline, you know, and to kind of enable them to get back on track. Yeah, thanks, Leah. Yeah.
One question on this topic, are there organizations that are active that maybe, you know, this is within their mandate, organizations that work with seniors that maybe could be partners on something like this?
Yeah, I mean, there are, I mean, you know, like I said, I do some senior legal aid work, but they often only have the resources for really acute situations. So when people are being evicted, they don't necessarily have the resources to be out there, or at least, sorry, the senior legal aid community. I'm sure there are other resources that we could be working with, but they often serve a county or a region. And I just feel like as the city, maybe we need to make sure we're doing our part just specifically locally, you know, to aid in that. So, but yeah, but I don't know all of the resources available out there doing this work.
Okay, so maybe increasing information at senior centers, other public senior institutions, making sure housing information is available there and those resources are available. Thank you, that's a great one.
Dan?
Yeah, good. So I think one way that we can impact this area as well is looking at workforce housing for teachers, city staff, police, fire, you know, the people that work here a lot already anyway, that are probably maybe in some cases really burdened by having to commute, in some cases from Central Valley. So providing some kind of workforce housing. And I think maybe one way to address that is changing the banking laws. And one way that we might be able to do that is through public banks or through the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, making structured loans to workforce and low-income borrowers and seniors that keep them, you know, first of all, get them into homes with low initial payment with an end of loan balloon. So maybe taking 25% of the principal balance and just saying, you don't have to pay this until we're done with the loan. So amortize 75% of the loan, for example, over 30 or 40 years, and then there's a balloon at the end. Maybe even, you know, basing that on some loan to value ratio, like 95%. And if particularly seniors get ill, you know, rather than having to make a decision to pay their rent or pay their medical costs so that they can continue to live, make that decision easier by simply saying, if you miss a payment, it just gets tacked onto that balloon at the end. And then that sort of loan structuring would keep people housed, not only when they get sick or when they're a senior, but, you know, pretty much, you know, anybody that's ever actually lived a life has probably experienced some time when they've gone more than 90 days having difficulty making their mortgage payments. And I think this kind of loan structuring would pretty much eliminate the housing crisis that's caused for families when they have incidents like that. You know, keep them housed and let them make up those payments at the end of the loan or whenever it's convenient for them.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I think, I don't know, Leah, if you want to weigh in on, you know, essentially the city's limitations and making sure that essentially what the city's limitations and doing some of those things are, or also just generally for everyone, understanding that these are all things that have to be, this is a city policy document, so they're things that the city has to be able to do as the city government, essentially.
If I may comment on that, because not everybody knows this, but the city council gets a seat on the MTC, and the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority is a unit of the MTC. And so policymakers on city council do have an opportunity to inject some conversation about this. We wouldn't be able to make, you know, banking law changes, but we can lobby for them with the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. And we can also ask people who are interested in creating the public bank to invest in it so that we can achieve some of these results. But yes, you're absolutely right. City council would not be saying we herefore and therefore create this public bank. It wouldn't happen that way.
Great, thank you for sharing.
And Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more comment because I saw Daisy's comment in the chat about, you know, working with the schools, and And I agree. Like, I think if we, because I think I've said this before, but I know my kids used to get this packet at the end of every week that had the flyers for the various things coming up, field trips and often summer camps, and, you know, other organizations could slip in a flyer. And I don't see why they wouldn't work with the city to provide, you know, flyers on housing opportunity, you know, housing information meetings coming up, and, you know, other opportunities for affordable housing. Because for a lot of people, especially if it's in, you know, multiple languages, that's the one thing that they count on saying, and they know they have to open that because that's often the thing that has the piece of information they need from the teacher. So, and I know every school does it differently. More and more people are going online, but even the online packet. Anyway, I just think working with HUSD to get to families specifically and dealing with affordable housing options would be a great place to do that. And I think Mira and I have talked about that actually. So
yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I know my kid's school has one person that's devoted to assisting people to navigate. It's like she's like a social worker. Do you know if HUSD has these people assigned to each school, or is it just like a district?
I don't know. I mean,
you know?
No, I mean, I'm thinking specifically of like each teacher sends home a Thursday envelope with the various stuff. And then they get all these flyers from someone that puts it in their box every, you know, like they just accept what the packet. But as far as that, because I don't know that every school has that. I'm not sure they have the resources to have that, but maybe someone else online has a little more information about HUSD and what they do.
Yeah, I'm just, it's a lot to ask to print, like, especially if the flyers are going to get recycled by half, you know what I mean? So trying to be intentional about our reaching out. Maybe Mira and I can follow up with HUSD and see if we haven't gotten a lot of traction with them, but we'll do our best to try and figure out if maybe there's a contingent, a department, you know, that works, and we can try to work through them and connect our housing division, who actually, and I think I put this into the chat, you know, we have a housing division. They are the division in the city that's responsible for, you know, COVID rent relief, tenant protections. They would connect seniors, you know, with the kind of support you were just talking about, Julie, you know, and I know that they're very active on Instagram, you know, and they post about free, you know, homeowner workshops, free foreclosure workshop, you know, and they're really doing a great job getting out there.
Yeah, I see that.
I think working with HUSD directly is a really good strategy.
Yeah, because I think that they're going to know, like you said, you know, if they do have social workers or, you know, whoever the person is on campus, they know those families that are like unstably housed and at risk of this, and they would be able to point them in that direction. But yeah, I don't know specifically if there's like a title at each school for this. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any more hands?
I don't see any other hands or chats about this topic.
Okay, great. Thank you. We got some great feedback. Move on here to the next topic. So this next topic is physical activity and health. So some of the policy topics we've identified. So addressing elevated asthma rates across the city, coordination with county and regional health organizations. So increasing coordination, improving coordination, dissemination of educational programs related to asthma risks and what causes asthma, increasing accessibility of low-cost health services, expansion of firehouse clinic locations, and lastly, improving access to air filtration systems in highly impacted areas. So I'll leave this up for a few seconds again, so you can review, and then we can open up the discussion to this policy framework. Okay, let's open up the discussion here, get into the mural activity. So do we have any thoughts or hands up with regard to physical activity and health?
I don't.
Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, I think that, you know, in some ways that the asthma issue might really be helped with the ongoing efforts that we talked about in the very beginning, the tree buffers from children's play areas and where children live specifically. I think that would probably go a long way to aid in that. And then the other thing is, I know, yeah, definitely the expansion of the health clinics, and also an increased ability to be screening for that at school sites. I know there are like mobile health clinics and things like that. I'm not, again, this sounds like a HESD collaboration, but to get, well, there's that new school that we're talking about that's going to be as part of that housing development up near the park. That kind of model, I know not that specific, but maybe more of a mobile model like that would be screening at schools at an early age to be able to identify those at risk for this. I think it's so important. So yeah, I think we're sort of coming full circle on that one from the very beginning. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So partnering with the school district with regard to physical activity and health generally, but particularly asthma. I think that's a great one.
And Eric?
Yeah, I was also thinking about the intersection between this one and some of the other topics that we were discussing, specifically access to green spaces. And I was wondering if it just says health there, but does that also include mental health and things like nature deficit disorder, providing access to these green spaces, things like that?
Yeah, it definitely includes mental health, and definitely the intersection of, access to green spaces, access to physical activity and mental health is an important topic. So that's really good. That's a really good one. Thank you.
And Julie, your hand is up. I'm not sure if it was up from before, or if you have another comment.
Well, I will say one more thing that I think these are also related, which I'm sure you knew they would be, that the physical activity during the summer would be, I think people would be really helped with this if there were free programs in the summer, because a free program would cost money, but it would be a preventative mechanism to keep people healthy and to avoid, things later on. So I just think it's just such a good investment to create programs that allow easy access for families where they're not having to scramble for, precious scholarships and, and hard to find programs. So yeah, I think these two are kind of linking together. So I don't know like what we can do citywide, or maybe that's a partnership with HARD, but making these things available for free or so low that it's it would be easier to do it than to not do it. So thank you.
Yeah, great. The intersection of public program accessibility and physical health. That's a great one.
Yeah, good comment.
Do you have any other hands?
I don't see any.
Okay. We'll give it maybe about 10 more seconds just in case that last one sparked any thoughts. And if not, we will move on. These all have been really, really great. So we will.
Can I say one more thing, Sarah, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
I got to tour the new senior center in Hayward, and that will be another great sort of access for physical and mental health. And I'm sure what the city can do to advertise those programs, I think are going to be really important, because what a beautiful space for seniors to get out and meet people and get healthy.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next policy framework. Next one is under the disadvantaged communities goal. The policy topics we've identified include limiting placement of polluting industries near sensitive receptors, promoting the use of best available technology to limit pollution exposure, coordination and communication with industry leaders to encourage reduced impacts, translation efforts to prevent linguistic isolation, essentially preventing language barriers for people by improving translation efforts. We also have making sure that meetings are temporally accessible, so accessible with timing and scheduling, childcare services for community meetings to improve accessibility, partnering with trusted community leaders to engage the community, diversity and equity training for city staff, and lastly, broad advertising strategies for community meetings. So making sure that these community meetings are advertised in a way where they're reaching different demographics and different groups of people. So I'll leave this up for a few seconds, and then I'll switch back to the first list of disadvantaged community policy topics, and then we'll get into the discussion. Okay, here's the first list for your review once more. Okay, with that, we'll open up the discussion.
I don't see any hands yet.
Okay.
Do you want to put up the mural board? So, oh, there we go.
Yeah, just took a minute there having some technical difficulties, but we got it up.
And we'll start with Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that affects disadvantaged communities more than others is not just polluting industries, but polluting transportation. So rail lines, which contribute air pollution, noise pollution, you know, potentially also leading to blight, although I have to admit, I think our railroad partners through this corridor have actually been pretty good about cleaning up the messes. But just generally speaking, it has been a problem in the community. And there also tend to be more affected by proximity of freeways and airports. And while mass transportation seems to benefit lower income and disadvantaged communities, I think all of these things also tend to contribute to, you know, sound and air pollution. I'm not really sure what kinds of things can be done about that. I mean, these, so I guess I'm just trying to also say that those things aren't on the list and probably ought to be. And we also tend to create, well, in the past, used to create business hubs, commercial corridors adjacent to disadvantaged communities. And I think to a certain degree, Hayward, in the last decade at least, since I've been involved, has made some effort to build actually nice housing in those areas that previously one might argue were you know, lower income or otherwise disadvantaged communities. So apparently there's been some effort at correcting that thought process that led to, I don't know what to call it, poor development decisions, or you know, you wouldn't want to have an industrial corridor and, you know, not in my backyard kind of thinking, but let's put it over there. And so, you know, it's more than the lack of good, fresh produce, but that's a problem. But there's also just everything else that we know is undesirable: noise, traffic, congestion, you know, all of that. And so we need to put some fixes in place there and recognize that lower income does not mean that they're worth less than the rest of humanity. We need to make some correction to that whole line of thinking that led to those decisions in the past.
Great. Yeah, I think that's really important and that's a great topic to bring up. So definitely addressing disproportionate impacts on lower income communities, whether that be pollution or noise, any real disproportionate impact on low income communities. I think that's a great one.
On?
I'm just curious about, oh, did you call on me? Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm just curious about how you would work with the industry to have, you know, the most advanced technology for, you know, keeping down pollution, keeping down noise, and ways of limiting polluting industry. I mean, we all know, you know, about the power plant that went down in Russell City, that kind of thing. Are there new things or new is there new thinking in the city that would help industry so that they could take pride in being cleaner?
Well, there's like a historic element to this. But what I can say is that the city did update the industrial district regulations in 2019, and as part of that update, and new developments that are going in have to provide a sustainability plan, and that's, you know, how are you minimizing your carbon footprint, you know, use of, minimizing water use, going beyond building code for new developments. And so I definitely think there are mechanisms in place for the city to control emissions and control equipment for new industrial uses. For older ones that are existing, it's really difficult. I mean, the only leverage a city would have is if they came in to modify their permit in some way to do something, right? Then we could use that as a lever to require them to upgrade equipment in some way. Another way that we could do that is if they are found in violation by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for, you know, emissions or polluting in some form. So then, you know, they potentially run into an issue there. But just, and then, you know, maybe there are just going to be grants that become available from the federal or state government to clean up industrial uses. That's potential. I don't know that the city has, and we could just throw it on the board, you know, as an idea that we create some kind of a fund or some kind of mechanism to incentivize older industrial businesses to transition old polluting equipment to new equipment. You know, there might be ways the city can partner with industrial uses to get federal grants to do that. There are sort of infrastructure grants out there. Eric, can you think of anything along those lines?
I was going to mention the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. The only other thing that I mentioned, we have a REACH code that was adopted a couple of years ago that basically encourages new construction to be all electric. Dealing with, right now we're discussing what we can do with new industrial buildings, because there's some industries that have to have natural gas at this point, and just in order to reach the temperatures that they need for certain industrial processes. But you know, and that's just one. Natural gas is just one thing that causes pollution. I'm sure there's many more in Hayward, but yeah, I think we're pretty limited, I think, in terms of different kinds of processes. And if somebody comes in for a permit to use hazardous materials, we might be able to have some leverage there. But it's a tough one.
Can I mention something about that? I love, Leah, your idea about the partnering. And I don't know, I think a lot of course, we're always talking about money, you know, how much does something cost to transition? But with a campaign and there are so many incentives right now out there to switch over to EV. They're all over the place, actually. And they're not going to go away, they're going to be more. They're not just the federal government, they're coming in from all directions. And for the part of the partnership could be the city taking, you know, kind of the campaign lead of approaching industry to be part of that. And I also think that if some of the industries are, you know, like your wastewater is the way Hayward does wastewater is, you know, net positive, and you know, it's such a point of pride for the city. Why not try to start to turn industry and the kind of industry in Hayward into a point of pride? I know it's public versus private, but it doesn't seem impossible with some partnering. I mean, I love the way you said it. I think the partner idea.
Great, thank you.
Great.
So really coordinating and partnering with these industries to encourage best practices with regard to pollution. Thank you. You have any other hands?
I don't see any hands.
Okay. And nothing in the chat box as well. Just want to make sure we're addressing any comments.
I don't see any new comments in the chat, but I would maybe open it up to, like, unless you want to do this just to, if you've thought of something that we talked about in the first section and you want to bring it up, I think you know, we'd be accepting of that.
Sure, yeah. If anyone has thought of any comments that they think would do well for a different policy framework, or anything has come to mind, they want to expand on anything that's in a different topic, please feel free to, and we can have that discussion as well. I'll zoom out here on this board so we can look at some of the topics. So these were the topics that we addressed. So feel free to share.
And Julie?
Yeah, my comments are more for the second half of that discussion, the disadvantaged communities discussion, because I think you're going to put up the second slide for that, but maybe we're just going to move on, right, with general questions now. So I wanted to say about the sort of like making city meetings more accessible. I would, you know, for example, on the Planning Commission, when we have an affordable housing project come up, we're often, you know, we alert the community that's in a certain radius around a certain project. But you know, and maybe you're doing this, Leah, I just don't know, but I'd like to see us reach out to all of the different housing advocacy groups, because, you know, the affordable housing are potentially for people that wouldn't know about it, wouldn't necessarily know about the meeting, wouldn't necessarily live in the community, but they would benefit from it in the city. And so that specific kind of project has a broader distribution of the meeting notice for that. And then similarly, like for city meetings, I mean, like so many of these meetings, it's so hard because people want to talk about it, but it's hard for people to get to them when we go back in person. Anything you can do to make the like actual programming, or really childcare that includes a meal, some pizza, I don't know, snacks, something like that. So it makes it really easy for parents to show up, because it's going to be fun for their kids, and not just that they're being housed while they're in the meeting, but it's actually going to be fun for them. Makes that more enticing for families, I think, to get out to participating in meetings like that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, great. So maybe childcare at community meetings as a method for ensuring accessibility. That's a great one.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that. There was a program at our school. It was like an 8-week program, but each night there was like a movie and pizza and crafts for the kids. And so it was actually easier to go to that meeting than it was stay home for summers, and then I got a lot out of it. Was an ongoing program. I don't remember what it was about, but it was enticing that the kids were going to have this fun night once a week. So
Great idea. Thank you. Do we have any other last topics, suggestions, or input on disadvantaged communities and or just any broad topic area? Okay, it looks like that is everyone. So I'll just show you the work that we've done here today. So here are the policy framework annotated comments. Looks like we got a lot of great feedback. So thank you all so much for sharing. Let me transition back to the PowerPoint here. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for participating. I encourage you all to visit the website. It's haywardhousingandclimateupdate.com, and I will send it back to the city so that they can kind of wrap up and say any last minute comments or closing statements. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming out. We appreciate your presence and sort of all the comments. I also want to let everybody know a recording will be put up on the website. We will still be accepting comments, so feel free to, you can email. I'm not sure if we're going to have a mural board up, but there's always going to be the ability to send in your comments about this. And then Eric mentioned, when is the sustainability committee meeting? May 9th? Is that what you said?
May 9th, yeah. So we can send out some information to the list with the report and meeting agenda.
Yeah, so those are, that's going to be a public meeting. I know environmental justice, we're loosely planning for this to go to a work session with the Planning Commission, hopefully maybe late May, I think is what we were talking about. And then, ultimately the project will go forward later this year. So it's a work in progress. This is really the input time. And so we would encourage all of you who've participated to please let your community members know let the people that you talk to around the water cooler or around your Zoom, your Zoom screen from your house, or however you want to, let your neighbors and your friends and anybody who lives in Hayward know about this work, and to encourage them to get in touch with us if they have any questions. We will also add all of your names if you're not already an interested party in receiving notices and updates about the housing element and CAP, EJ, and safety element update. We will add you to our lists, so you will start receiving regular correspondence around all the meetings. So I think with that, we may call it, unless anybody else has anything else they want to add or any questions.
thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.